Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something, well, truly monumental, a piece of legislation that just cleared the Senate.
Hmm.
And it could fundamentally rewire, the landscape of your daily life, your money, even your future here in America.
Yeah, it's that big.
We're talking about those sweeping changes that sound maybe a bit abstract, but they hit home. Real impacts on everyday people like you.
Exactly. We're here to unpack what's officially called the One Big Beautiful Bill. Quite a name.
Yeah.
But seriously, it's a massive all-in-one legislative package. It just squeezed through the Senate on July 1st, 2025.
Oh, okay.
And its reach is just incredibly broad. It touches everything from, your taxes to border security. It's huge.
And that's really our mission today, isn't it? To cut through all that complexity, because this isn't just, another bill.
Not at all.
It's a multi-trillion-dollar package, and we want to break down exactly what it means for you, whether you're a U.S. citizen or maybe a non-citizen living and working here. We'll look at how it reshapes taxes, healthcare, immigration, federal spending. The goal is pretty clear. Give you a precise, actionable understanding, because this is significant, really significant.
Absolutely. So let's unpack this thing.
Okay, where do we start? Maybe with the name itself. One big, beautiful bill.
Right. Well, the name itself is very much a political branding effort, heavily pushed by former President Donald Trump.
You can tell.
Yeah, it aims for that positive, unifying spin,
Mhm.
but the actual policies inside,
Mm.
they're far-reaching, and they have some really sweeping consequences.
And presumably not the same consequences for everyone.
Oh, definitely not. They impact people quite differently. Depends on your citizenship status, your income level, your immigration history, lots of factors.
So what's the core philosophy driving something this big? It doesn't feel random. Is this basically the legislative backbone of Trump's second-term agenda?
That's a great way to put it. It's absolutely a deliberate blueprint. Its core agenda, well, first, it's designed to permanently lock in those 2017 Trump-era tax cuts.
Ah, right. I remember those.
They're the ones that cut corporate taxes, change individual brackets,
Mm-hmm.
mostly helping higher earners and corporations, making those permanent. That's a huge fiscal statement.
Okay.
Beyond that, it aims to significantly cut social safety net spending. Think Medicaid, SNAP.
Okay.
It also funds large-scale immigration enforcement. Really ramps it up. And it fundamentally tries to restructure how government benefits and taxes work
Restructure how?
for individuals, for businesses. And yeah, there's a big expansion of border security and military spending woven throughout the whole thing.
Okay, so if this is the new reality, where do we feel it first? Usually it's the wallet, right?
Unsurprisingly, yes. For most of us, it starts right there.
Yeah.
So let's peel back the layers on these tax changes.
Right.
Okay, so the tax changes, they really affect nearly everyone. First off, the bill extends those 2017 tax cuts indefinitely. So those lower personal income tax rates, they're set to continue. For families, there's an increased child tax credit. But it's important to note, this is for some families. It's not like a universal boost.
Okay, so extending old cuts, tweaking some credits, but it's not just that, is it? I heard about some totally new deductions.
That's right. There are some fascinating new deductions introduced here.
Like what?
Okay, so there are deductions for overtime pay and for tips.
Oh, wow. Tips. That's big for service workers.
Huge. There's also a new deduction for interest on car loans, but specifically if the car is built in the U.S.
Interesting detail.
Plus a new senior deduction, up to $6,000 for individuals over 65. And remember these SALT deduction drops.
State and local taxes. Yeah, that cap was controversial.
Exactly. Well, now the cap is raised to $40,000, but only for households with incomes under $500,000.
Okay, so targeted relief there too. That's a pretty substantial change for people in high-tax states.
It really is. Could put more money back in a lot of pockets.
So those deductions sound, quite targeted. But what about the flip side? Any new taxes coming in with this bill?
Yes, there are indeed several new taxes being introduced.
Such as?
Well, probably the most talk about one is a 1% remittance tax.
Remittance tax, explain that.
It's on cash-based money transfers sent to other countries. So this directly impacts immigrants sending money back home. Think India, Mexico, the Philippines.
Ah, okay, so if you use, like, Western Union with cash.
Exactly. Cash or maybe money orders, that kind of thing. The bill also brings in higher taxes on wealthy universities taxing their endowments, and new taxes on certain digital assets and gambling winnings.
Okay, so new deductions, new taxes. Beyond the wallet, though.
Yeah.
You mentioned social support systems, Medicaid, SNAP. What's happening there?
This is where we see some really significant cuts. Big changes to the social safety net.
How so?
Well, it establishes new work requirement for Medicaid recipients. That alone could drastically change who qualifies and how they get health care.
Work requirements, that's always controversial.
Very. It also reduces state flexibility in how Medicaid is funded. So states might have less room to tailor programs to their own populations. They might be forced into tougher choices about who gets covered, what services are available.
SNAP, food stamps?
Benefits are cut there too. It requires states to co-pay more and increases monitoring of recipients. These are substantial changes that are going to affect millions of low-income folks and families.
That really does sound like a major redefinition of how those support systems work. Okay, shifting gears a bit, immigration, always a hot topic. What's in the bill regarding border enforcement and immigration policy?
Oh, the immigration and border parts are extensive and incredibly impactful.
More funding.
A lot more funding. A significant $150 billion boost straight to ICE and Border Patrol.
Wow, $150 billion. And what's that funding for?
It's explicitly tied to expanding deportation operations. The stated plan is to deport up to 1 million people per year.
1 million per year. That's a huge number.
It's staggering.
Yeah.
Beyond that, visa and asylum application fees, they're going up across the board.
Okay.
There are also new limits on access to Medicaid and other public benefits, even for legal immigrants.
Even for green card holders.
Yes, potentially delays or exclusions, and emergency medical access for undocumented immigrants. That's being cut. The bill also speeds up asylum decisions and removals. Less time for appeals, fewer legal delays for asylum seekers.
Okay, that's a lot on enforcement and process. What about other federal spending? You mentioned military, maybe infrastructure.
Yes, it does touch on those too. There's a massive $150 billion boost for military modernization.
Same number as ICE and Border Patrol.
Exactly, $150 billion with a sharp focus on, drones, AI, emerging tech.
Okay.
Interestingly, there's also $50 billion specifically set aside for rural hospital funding.
Rural hospitals, why?
Well, it's sort of presented as a way to soften the blow from those Medicaid cuts we just discussed, bolstering healthcare infrastructure in underserved areas.
I see. A counterbalance, maybe?
Perhaps. Plus, there are targeted investments planned for NASA and various transportation projects around the country.
Okay. So we've kind of walked through the big pieces. Taxes, social safety nets, immigration, other spending. Now, let's try to synthesize this. The crucial question: who really benefits here? And who faces the biggest challenges? Let's start with U.S. citizens.
Right. For U.S. citizens, there are definitely some potential benefits on the table. Middle and upper middle class families, they probably stand to gain from the extended tax cuts.
And those new deductions.
And the new deductions, yeah. Tips, overtime, the higher child tax credit for some. Senior citizens, too, could benefit from that new senior deduction. And obviously, if you're connected to the defense sector or your military family or live near one of those rural hospitals getting funds, that's a direct benefit.
What about that remittance tax? Does that hit citizens?
Generally, no. Not unless they're sending cash abroad, which, for most U.S. citizens is pretty rare. They'd likely use banks.
Okay, but every big law like this has a flip side, right? What are the major drawbacks or challenges for citizens?
Oh, absolutely. The drawbacks are significant. First, estimates suggest up to 11 million Americans could lose Medicaid access.
11 million.
That's the projection, due to the new work requirements and funding changes. That's a fundamental shift in healthcare access for millions.
Yeah, that's not just a number.
Exactly. Low-income citizens, single mothers may be relying on SNAP. They could see benefits reduced. So you're weakening the social safety net overall.
Which puts pressure elsewhere.
Right. It could increase pressure on local hospitals, charities, community groups to fill those gaps. That strains local economies. And maybe the biggest long-term issue,
The deficit.
the deficit. This bill is projected to increase the national deficit by up to $3.3 trillion over the next decade.
3.3 trillion. Wow.
That raises huge questions about long-term risks. What does it mean for Social Security? For Medicare solvency down the road?
That deficit number alone is just staggering. Okay, now let's pivot. Let's talk about non-citizens. Green card holders, visa holders, undocumented immigrants. What does this bill mean for them?
For many non-citizens, the challenges are pretty substantial. That 1% remittance tax, for example.
Right, the cash transfers.
It applies to any cash or money order sent home. So imagine you're an immigrant, carefully saving money to send to family back home. That 1% might seem small, But if you're sending money regularly,
It adds up.
it adds up. It's effectively a tax on essential support for families abroad.
Okay. And what about just the cost of, staying legal or trying to get legal status?
You're going to see higher visa and asylum fees right across the board.
For which visas?
Pretty much all the common ones. F1 student visas, H1B skilled worker visas, H2A agricultural, L1 transfers, B1, B2 visitor visas, even asylum applications and work permits, all getting more expensive.
Okay.
Public benefits access is also being restricted. Green card holders might face new delays or exclusions from Medicaid and SNAP. And as we mentioned, emergency Medicaid for undocumented immigrants is being cut.
And the enforcement aspect.
That increased ICE funding means accelerated deportation efforts,
Yeah.
especially focused on visa overstayers or those with minor legal issues. More detentions, more deportations. Plus, there's less access to legal aid, fewer protections during deportation or asylum reviews. Legal immigrants will also likely face stricter rules around work and residency documentation, more scrutiny.
It sounds like just a lot more hurdles financially and legally. Are there any, nuanced positives in there for non-citizens? Or is it pretty much all challenge?
Well, it's mostly challenging, but there are a couple of nuances. What's interesting is that people using formal banking channels for remittances, bank transfers, credit cards, they avoid that 1% tax.
So it pushes people towards banks.
In a way, yeah. It incentivizes using more formal, traceable financial systems. And skilled workers who are here legally employed and earning within those tax brackets that got extended, they can still benefit from the lower tax rates.
Okay, that makes sense. Let's maybe dive a bit deeper into specific groups just to make this really concrete. First, H-1B visa holders, highly skilled workers, often in tech. What are the direct impacts for them?
Okay, if you're an H-1B professional, that 1% remittance tax could hit you if you send cash home.
But avoidable if they use banks.
Exactly. The clear advice is use formal bank transfers, use your U.S. debit or credit cards, avoid the fee.
What else for H-1B?
Expect to pay more,
Yeah.
just generally. Higher visa fees for renewals, extensions, even for dependent visas like the H-4 for spouses and kids.
Okay.
And with that huge boost in deportation funding, expect tighter scrutiny on legal status, more checks on work authorization, visa validity, potential overstays, even for high-skilled workers. There's less room for error.
And benefits.
Limitations on benefits like Medicaid or emergency aid could affect you or your dependents, especially, say, if there's a gap between jobs.
So it sounds like increased costs, more scrutiny, any upsides for them at all?
Well, on the tax side, maybe a small silver lining. H-1B workers could benefit from the extended Trump-era tax cuts.
Right.
And maybe those new deductions, like for overtime, if applicable.
Right.
So the bottom line for H-1B folks, you'll probably pay more in integration fees, face stricter documentation checks, but you might see some modest tax savings if you stay fully compliant with everything.
Got it. Okay, what about international students? F1 visas. That's a huge group, right? Here for education, often hoping for future work. How does this bill change their journey?
Yeah, for international students on F1 visas, the stakes definitely feel higher now. You'll see new and higher visa fees. For the F1 application itself, for OPT.
Optional practical training, the work permit after graduation?
Exactly. And for STEM extensions, too. Basically, the paperwork costs for students are going up.
Okay. And the remittance tax?
That 1% tax on cash sent home. It applies to students, too. Again, avoidable if you use U.S. banking channels. But sending cash just got costlier.
What about enforcement for students? Does that increased ICE funding touch them?
Absolutely. That's crucial for students to understand. Stricter documentation enforcement is coming.
Meaning?
Tighter border checks. And that ICE funding boost could mean more scrutiny on things like expired I-20s, that's their student status document, or issues with CPT or OPT work authorization. Any violation could have bigger consequences now.
And benefits access for students.
Like other non-citizens, F1 students generally have no access to benefits like Medicaid or SNAP anyway, and this bill likely tightens those rules further. So while students might not feel immediate tax changes, the overall cost and maybe the stress of staying in the U.S. legally, that's definitely gone up, especially if you're trying to navigate OPT or transition to work.
Right. Okay, finally, let's address undocumented immigrants. They seem to face, arguably, the most significant changes, the biggest challenges under this new law. What does it mean for them?
Yeah, for undocumented individuals, this law brings, frankly, historic levels of enforcement. That $150 billion boost to ICE, it's explicitly for arrests, detentions, deportations.
And those mass deportation targets.
They're back. With that stated goal of up to 1 million deportations per year, it signals a massive crackdown.
And the remittance tax hits them too.
If they use cash transfers, yes. So sending essential help home to family now costs more, even for this population.
And the impact on any kind of safety net for this group sounds really severe.
It is. Emergency Medicaid access is being cut. Many safety net programs were already off limits, but this potentially cuts access to critical hospital care unless it's paid out of pocket.
And legal protections.
Fewer protections in court. Legal defense in deportation cases is being restricted. Less time to respond, fewer chances to appeal. It's a much tougher legal landscape.
So the bottom line for undocumented individuals.
Unprecedented enforcement levels, stripping away what little safety net might have existed, and even penalizing small financial acts like sending money home. It's a very difficult situation, made much harder.
Okay, so just to kind of circle back and reiterate, this one big beautiful bill, despite the name, is truly one of the largest fiscal and immigration reform bills we've seen in decades. Sweeping impacts.
Absolutely.
And it really is a mixed bag, isn't it? Depends entirely on who you are and where you stand.
It really does. For non-citizens, the clear themes are higher costs, much stricter immigration scrutiny, and maybe subtly a push towards using formal financial systems like banks for U.S. citizens. It's a picture of lower taxes for some, yes, but also a reduced social safety net for potentially millions, and a significantly growing national debt that affects everyone long term.
So really, regardless of your status, understanding these changes is just crucial, isn't it? For your financial planning, your healthcare access, maybe even your whole immigration journey in the years ahead.
Absolutely critical.
This bill isn't just some political talking point. It's the new reality that's going to touch countless lives.
Yeah, and this raises a really important, maybe sobering question for all of us to think about.
What's that?
How will the long-term fiscal impact of this bill, especially the projected $3.3 trillion deficit increase, how will that affect future generations? What does it mean for the solvency of bedrock programs like Social Security and Medicare down the line? It's a question that goes way beyond the immediate winners and losers, It's about the kind of future we're building. It will shape our nation for decades.
That's definitely something to chew on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. All the best, and we will meet again with another important subject in the next meeting.